Is there any one or maybe any interpretations that have served for inspiration for this?
I would say to me, it's much more of an amalgamation of a lot
Okay.
of different interpretations. But, I always, when I wanted to approach this story in particular, actually, I wanted to breathe new life into it, do a fresh sort of take.
Yeah! Where's my wife? Do you hear me? Dismount and walk forward.
Darling, you're home?
And waiting for you with loving arms.
Must you maul her like an animal, Daniel?
Calm yourself, Mrs. Stevenson. I'm just getting into character.
They both insisted upon hiring Daniel's patients to cater. I too thought it would look as unseemly as it does.
Is that all you discovered while befriending Mrs. Schmidt, my dear?
Dr. Schmidt fits the description of our target in nearly every way.
What's going by is Webster Style, the man, the voice, the fragrance, and we are here with Dave Swartz. Dave, how you doing today, man?
I'm doing great. How are you doing?
I'm doing very well. It's a pleasure to speak with you. I'm always excited to speak with creators, especially independent creators. One of the things about the creative process is that it's such an amazing journey from where you have this idea that's just like a random spark until you actually see it to fruition, especially when it comes to a comic. And you have a long portfolio of comics, but you have a new one that is either out or coming out.
It's in the process. So
Okay, the process. Okay.
yeah, the first half was released a couple years ago.
Okay.
And I am a work for hire artist, so I really just had to refocus my attention on work and getting things done. So I really didn't have the time to devote to my own story.
Understood.
So I kind of put this on the back burner for a little bit, but now I figured out a way to be able to take a day off and devote a little bit more time to this book. And yeah, I'm really looking forward to finishing it up.
So, so tell us about Confederate Monster.
Sure. So, in a nutshell, Confederate Monster is Cowboy Frankenstein meets the Civil War. So the story is filled with all the classic Frankenstein characters. Igor and Victor Frankenstein, a version of the Bride. It's a little different, but still the Bride.
Right.
And so this story takes place 8 years after the original Mary Shelley tale.
Okay.
So we kind of get to catch up with some of these characters much further along into their, lives that we don't really know anything about. So I kind of had a little bit of freedom in that way to interpret it however I thought it would be interesting. So Confederate Monster is really more told through the eyes of Igor, who in the story we refer to as Dr. Daniel Schmidt because he has been in hiding ever since the events of what happened with the original monster. So he's been rebuilding his life slowly over the last 8 years, and the Confederacy finds out about him and his dark past and convince him rather horrifically in order to reanimate their dead army.
Okay. One of the things I love about Frankenstein is just the so many different interpretations over the years. Is there any one or maybe any interpretations that have served for inspiration for this?
I would say to me, it's much more of an amalgamation of a lot
Okay.
of different interpretations. But, I always, when I wanted to approach this story in particular, actually, I wanted to breathe new life into it, do a fresh sort of take. So again, my monster and all of my characters, although they are inspired by the originals that we all know,
Right.
they're very different. So their relationships to one another are a little different. For instance, Victor and Igor traditionally are seen in pop culture as more of this like master servant kind of relationship.
Right.
Whereas in my book, they are actually more of a father son or a teacher mentor kind of protege kind of thing.
Yes.
So Igor is much more of almost like a carbon copy of Victor, always trying to kind of live up to his standard.
Right. Interesting. Uh, Let me ask you this though, kind of piggybacking off of that. What are, if you don't have just one, what are some of your favorite interpretations of Frankenstein's monster over the years?
Oh man. I mean, I'm a stickler for the classics. I grew up with, classic Universal monsters, the black and white versions. So like the Boris Karloff stuff, I
Right.
really enjoy that. And I would also say I'm kind of partial to the Hammer film,
Right.
the Lee version. I feel like, again, kind of a different visual take
Right.
the character. And then I know it's going to sound silly, but I am a huge fan of Young Frankenstein. So
Love it.
that whole twist and the satire that came along with that story actually in ways influenced some of the things in my book too. So
That's all great choices. I'll add one to. I love just Universal monster movies in general. Frankenstein is my favorite. And I think for me, like Bride is one of like my top 10 movies ever. I just absolutely love it. I love the Hammer films. Bride of Frankenstein is just one of the best comedies ever. But I will do you one with this. While I did not enjoy the movie, especially when I first saw it, I really enjoyed the depiction of Frankenstein and Van Helsing. I thought it was such a great amalgamation of like that Universal as well as the sort of Hammer stuff. And that was for me like the most redeeming quality of them. I'm like, oh, this is amazing. This is great. So that's why I think that, and I'm excited about your book, especially the more I learn about it. The way Frankenstein has been constantly reinterpreted, it is so much artist license there to really expand the character while it's still the Frankenstein we all know and love. And I think they're so amazing. And very few characters in literary history really are able to be used like that, but still retain their core essence.
yes, I honestly I couldn't agree more. I think that as much as Frankenstein has been reinterpreted and reimagined, I also think that there is still room, and I really think that this is why I went the route that I did, to sort of reinterpret the plot and the story in which he is set in, right? So we've seen different versions of Frankenstein in different horror movies. It doesn't necessarily have to be his movie, right? Like in Van Helsing, he's more of like a part of the ensemble.
Right.
But I mean, really looking at the way in which they tell the core story of Frankenstein, it doesn't fluctuate as much as say like Dracula or other types of monsters that I feel like have been more explored in ways. Like even the Wolfman, to a certain extent, I feel like has been sort of reimagined in a lot of different storylines in a lot of different ways. And so again, I wanted to see what else I could do with Frankenstein and set it in a different time period, in a different place. I was just talking with someone the other day about how almost all previous incarnations of the Frankenstein story are set in Europe somewhere.
Right.
So it's
Right.
very rare that you would find something set more in America. So again, just looking to expand, freshen it up, change it up, see what else is out there.
Yeah. I think that of it is really unique in what, the more I learn about it, it really has my interest because it, like you said, it's always set in Europe. And again, like I said, I love the Universal movies. So you have that sort of, dark, drab sort of Eastern European backdrop for all of this, which really adds to the suspense and fear. Yet you flip it to the Americas, especially Civil War time, and this is sort of depictions there is like bright, open fields, war, battle. Like it's such a different sort of backdrop for this, while character that is in many ways an embodiment of learning humanity and reclaiming humanity, but also very much about the macabre and the undead and our own perceptions of life. So I'm very interested in how that really aids into fleshing out and the story, also just growing these characters as well, as you've explained.
Right. And really the joy of it for me has been, seeing where I could take some of these characters, where logically might they have landed, 8 years later after an event such as, the monster being reanimated and going on this rampage. Because, in my story, I kind of interpreted the events that happen after the monster is reanimated as this chaotic sort of, we need to capture him because we've unleashed the beast and
Right.
he's rampaging through, the village. And actually, as part of the campaign that I did the first time for issues 1 through 3, I was able to put together a prequel story that sort of kind of bridges the gap between the original story and mine.
Right.
That's like issue 0. It's all black and white. It's a self-contained story. But again, I think that one is pretty important to really how I, jump ahead forward and why certain things are the way that they are. Yeah. So again, it's always fun to just reimagine things and not just reimagine them, but kind of imagine where it would have gone, right, if we had continued following these characters.
Right. Right. And I find I'm fascinated about the book because, again, I keep going back to, and my apologies, because I am a humongous fan of the Frankenstein movies universe, and I remember how they told that story and how it's disjointed, especially when you get to Son of Frankenstein. You're like, what? But I loved how at least there was a continuation of the story there. And even with the Hammerfields as well, you had that continuation. So I love how when you have these continuing stories of these characters, where you really get to see the evolution of them and how not just they react to the world, but how the world that they live in continues to react to them as well. And sometimes grow in sympathy, but other times grow in even more fear.
Right. Right. No, that's a very good point. Absolutely. And I would say in my story, all the characters are very different than you probably remember them.
Right.
And some of them, evolve and change across the 6 issues of Confederate Monster. But, some characters like the monster, when we first meet him, he's, fully formed and he doesn't change very much. But like, say, for instance, like Victor, when we first meet him, he's absolutely out of his mind. He's been in an insane asylum for 8 years. So he's just, emaciated. He's got this mane of hair. But then, as we continue, we clean him up and he's able to regain his marbles in some fashion that I don't want to give away. But yeah, it's definitely interesting to see what other sides of these characters can we explore.
Okay. So now the Kickstarter's out. As of right now, you've passed your code, which is great. So it's for issues 1 through 4.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So the series itself, is it just the 4 issue contains those 4 issues, or do you have plans for more?
No, I actually, for this particular story that I'm telling, I have plans for 2 more. So right now, the way that I've structured it, there's a double issue for the first issue and a double issue for the last issue, and then every issue in between is a tight, like, 20 pages. So and I like doing it that way because I feel like when you pick up the first issue, it's, in my opinion, better to give the reader just a little extra so that they feel like they're getting invested in the story. They really want to see where these characters go. And then the same thing is true at the end, where you've invested all this time in reading the story. I don't want the ending to feel like it's rushed or like it went by too fast. So I want to, again, extend the ending a little, just so readers feel like they got a nice, solid ending.
So essentially, they're getting 6 issues for the price of 4.
Basically, plus the issue 0. So
Right.
it's going to ultimately be around like 180 pages when it's all done.
Nice, nice. So how does working on or creating the Confederate monster, how does that compare to some of your other works that you've put out?
That's a good question. I would say for me, since it is my book, and after all, I'm doing everything in it. I think in ways I give a little more attention to it. Not to say that I don't pay attention to my day job work, but I give it a little bit more love. I get a little bit more attention. I do tend to sort of look at it with a bit more of a critical eye.
Right.
And I think my approach to it mirrors what the story demands. So typically when I'm doing my day job work, if it's something like a sci-fi story, or right now I'm doing a story that's sort of inspired by the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, so it's very like 90s esque.
Mhm.
So for those types of stories, I kind of just simplify my style a bit, so it's a little closer to almost like an animated style.
Right.
Because I feel like it fits the genre better. But when it comes to like horror stories like this one, and I've done a few others for other people, I do tend to put a little extra line work into it, a little more shadows, a lot more in the way of textures, and more dramatic kind of scenes and camera angles. So yeah, I mean, I don't necessarily think that this one has anything different than other books that I've done have, but I definitely tailor my art slightly to the type of story that I'm doing at that time.
Right. That makes sense. But I think even with some of the things you said, when it's your baby, it's just different. Like
Yeah,
your overall like and how much you pour into it. Not that you don't, enjoy the other things that you do and draw, but when it's yours, there's just something like you can't help but go a little bit extra. So no, everything you're saying totally makes sense.
for sure.
So,
Sure.
so Dave, where can everybody find the book so they can go out and support?
Sure. So, if you type in Confederate Monster on Kickstarter, you can find it pretty easily. It's pretty much, I believe it's the only campaign that really comes up when you type that in. But you can find me and links to the campaign on my social accounts. So I'm on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. All of them are at Dave Swartz Art. That's SWARTZ, not SCH. And my website is also daveswartzart.com. So if you just type in Dave Swartz Art anywhere on the internet, I'm sure you're going to find me pretty easily.
Well, you guys should have seen all that flash there below. If you missed it, everything's in the show notes. So make sure you go out and support. Check out Confederate Monster. It looks absolutely great. It has a great trailer as well. And I'm definitely checking out. Like I said, I'm a Frankenstein fanatic myself, so I'll definitely check it out. Dave, thank you very much for your time. I appreciate it. Make sure you support. You guys stay tuned. We got more coming. Peace.